Hi, it's Carl Brower, and I'm standing next to a McLaren Artura Spider painted in a stunning and brilliant shade of Tokyo Cyan Blue. Now, this is the first time I've experienced this car in Spider form. I did drive it on the press launch 2 years ago as a coupe, but I have not driven the retractable hardtop Spider until now. I've had several adventures in it, including driving it on twisty roads out here toward Lake Elsinore and the Beverly Hills Rodeo Drive experience. It's been a lot of fun. Let's dive into the details and talk about McLaren's beautiful Tokyo Cyan Blue Artura Spider. Now, there's some pretty cool design elements with this McLaren Artura. I really like the carbon fiber fender vents that actually have a functional purpose in releasing wheelhouse pressure and letting the car have better downforce at high speeds. You've got dihedral doors, pretty much standard fare for any modern supercar. If you want the supercar experience, you got to have the cool dihedral doors. Certainly was working at Rodeo Drive yesterday and impressing people as we were getting in and out of the car. This rear deck has some fairly elaborate cooling vents, and they combine with the roof pillars and these strakes that come back from the roof to cool a lot of the engine heat that apparently is building up under this tonneau cover. If you're wondering how effective the Artura Spider's engine cooling system is, sit in the driver's seat, look through the rearview mirror. You see an almost constant heat wave rising from the car's deck lid area. McLaren uses staggered wheels for the Artura Spider. You've got 19-inch wheels up front with 235/35 Pirelli P0 tires, and then out back, they go for a 20-inch wheel with 295/35 tires. All right, driving the new McLaren Artura Spider, let's talk about some of these interior features that I like. For instance, the steering wheel and the 10.9-inch digital instrument cluster move together. So no matter where you adjust this wheel, that cluster is always properly located just past the steering wheel and easy to see. The steering wheel itself doesn't have any buttons on it, which I find interesting. It's the opposite direction that, say, the Ford GT went. I had my new Ford GT, it was loaded with buttons. This one doesn't have a single button on it. The only thing that you can do with this wheel is honk the horn and, of course, control the paddle shifters. But there are all sorts of controls within reach of the steering wheel, so you don't have to take your hands off of it. McLaren has standardized the engine controls and the suspension controls, and you can adjust those right here on the corners of this binnacle without ever taking your hands off the wheel. So I like that. Another element of this car is the seats. I'm sitting on these Club Sport seats that are the standard seats. You can get adjustable and heated seats. There's options, of course. There's options all over the place for this car. We're going to talk about it later. But what's interesting to me is that these standard seats, they don't offer any adjustment for seat back angle. These seats actually have the adjustable lumbar, which I believe is an option. We'll look at the window sticker later. But there is no way to adjust seat back angle on this seat. And I would normally not be happy about that because I tend to like to sit more upright. What's cool is apparently McLaren knows you should be sitting upright because the non-adjustable angle that these seats are at is pretty much perfect for me. I don't need to adjust the seat back angle. I've always been a big believer that too many people sit too far back. They're leaning back too much when they're driving their car. Apparently McLaren agrees, and when they designed these seats, they made sure that the seat back angle was properly upright. So I like it. I don't need to adjust it. Thank you, McLaren, for knowing how to properly locate the driver. Of course, you can configure this interior in a wide variety of ways. There's Napa leather, there's carbon fiber trim, there's carbon fiber accents. This vehicle's got this teal blue pinstriping trim throughout the interior, and it does have these indigo, or let's just call them purple, ambient lights on the door that at night I've seen them already and they look pretty cool. It's also got the 10.25-inch digital gauge cluster that I talked about that's very high resolution. It looks good. And it's got this vertically oriented 8-inch central touchscreen that right now I've got Apple CarPlay going on. And I should note, I wasn't able to get Apple CarPlay to work initially. I've had this car for a little while and I couldn't get Apple CarPlay to work. And I didn't know if it was, well, maybe it's not wireless. Well, it isn't wireless. But then I tried plugging it into a USB cable and it wasn't working there either. Well, that's because it was a USB cable that went into the USB regular port here. There's a USB-C port underneath this center console armrest pad, and there's some storage in there. That's where my phone is right now. And when I put a USB-C cable into the USB-C port underneath this pad, and then plugged it into my iPhone. Then I immediately got Apple CarPlay. So quick tip for anyone buying one of these McLarens, it wants a USB-C cord start to finish from the phone to the input for it to work for CarPlay. Of course, the engine in this vehicle is a hybrid. It's McLaren's first volume hybrid. The McLaren P1 was their first hybrid, the high-end supercar. This is the first time they've put a hybrid drivetrain in one of their primary high-volume models. It is a twin turbocharged V6 engine combined with an electric motor and a 7.4 kilowatt hour battery. And the total horsepower that this drivetrain makes is 691 horsepower and 531 pound-feet of torque. And it's connected to an 8-speed dual-clutch transmission. Now this gets this vehicle from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 3 seconds flat, and it's got a top speed of 205 miles per hour. So there is no performance hit or lacking acceleration as a result of this not having a V8 engine by any means. This car is very fast. And what's neat is that McLaren uses the term torque fill to describe how the electric motor works, how it effectively fills any gap in torque that might otherwise exist because of, given RPM range that you're in when you're accelerating or driving at, various speeds and you want to go. And it does work that way. That's why electric motors are awesome, and that's why electric cars and hybrids that have properly tuned electric motors feel so quick, because instant torque is a fabulous thing when you're in a performance car, and that's what this vehicle has by design, the torque fill electric motor. And if there's anything that I've noticed about it when I'm driving it is that it's maybe just a little less, rambunctious. This vehicle doesn't feel as rambunctious as the twin turbo V8s in, say, the 720 or the 765. It doesn't mean it doesn't feel fast, but there is less of a visceral impact when you're really hard on the throttle, because the electric motor just essentially makes the car shoot forward like an electric car, and there isn't a lot of drama while it's doing that. And to me, that's not a bad thing necessarily, but if you're expecting a traditional McLaren acceleration experience that you're used to from their twin turbo V8s, it's different in this car. Not slower, but different. Beyond that instant torque fill effect that you get from the electric motor, there's some other nice features that come along with the hybrid drivetrain, such as 11 miles of pure electric driving if you fully charge the battery and want to go in full electric mode. You can charge that 7.4 kilowatt hour battery about 80% in 2.5 hours, according to McLaren. And that's off of a regular household charger, regular household wall outlet. So that shows you how that battery is very small. It's there to serve the purpose of performance, but not to give the car a long range, or more importantly, not to weigh it down. Thankfully, it doesn't weigh the car down a lot. It does also benefit, of course, fuel efficiency. This car is rated at 19 miles per gallon mixed, and it's got the 45 mpge equivalent. Now, perhaps the coolest thing that I've decided about this system is its ability to charge the battery without using a household outlet or anything else. It's very neat. You can put this vehicle in track mode, and at that point, it's trying to use the battery for maximum performance, and it wants to make sure there's plenty of battery power for any kind of bursts of acceleration as you're going around the track. So what it does is, when you're not asking for max acceleration, it uses the car's forward movement to charge the battery. Basically, in between turns on the track even, it would be using that movement to charge the battery. And what that means is that if you put it in track mode and you don't drive on a track, you just drive a long distance, for instance, from Los Angeles down to Orange County, like I did recently in the car, you can take the battery from 0% charge to 94% charge. I charged from essentially 0, it was almost empty, to 94%, driving it down from Los Angeles in track mode. Beyond track mode, you do also have sport, comfort, and electric mode. And I did use electric mode a lot when I was up in Beverly Hills yesterday with this car, and it was really helpful because you're going at low speed, trying to pull in and out of parking spaces or going up into parking garages, and it's nice to have that drama-free, consistent throttle response that you get from a pure electric motor. I really like that, and it's funny because If you can keep the weight of a hybrid system down, like McLaren obviously has with this tiny axial flux motor that they've got, plus that small battery pack, the benefits of having a all-electric operating mode are really helpful and appreciated when you're going at low speeds in a city, and I was glad to have them. Beyond those 4 engine settings, you can have 3 different suspension settings in the McLaren Artura Spider. You can have track, sport, or comfort. Apparently they didn't think you needed a separate handling setting for electric mode like you have in the engine. If you do that, you're going to be using the continuously variable suspension system that's in this vehicle. It's called proactive damping control. That's what McLaren calls it. It plays off of the double wishbone front suspension and multi-link rear suspension, adjusting based on what kind of driving you're doing. Right now I'm in comfort mode. The car has been extremely comfortable. Honestly, when you're on the freeway with this vehicle, between having the top up, putting it in comfort engine mode, and putting it in comfort suspension mode, it's an extremely refined experience. It'd be very easy to cover a lot of miles in this vehicle in comfort mode on both the engine and suspension settings. The car is very forgiving and livable, and there's not a lot of noise in here at highway speeds. A couple other settings you can have include fully manual transmission control. If you hit the manual button right here in the middle of the engine toggle switch, and you've got electronic stability control that you can turn completely off if you so dare on the suspension toggle switch. There's also a drift control mode you can put this vehicle in, where it'll have varying levels of sideways action that you can get into before stability control will kick on if you feel like you want to start drifting the vehicle, which just on some level seems both very cool and very ridiculous at the same time. Something else I'd want to note about this vehicle that I really appreciated when I was in Beverly Hills yesterday was how quickly the front end lift works. I was very spoiled after having my new Ford GT because that hydraulic lift system was essentially instantaneous. You hit the button and the vehicle moved right now. Most of these systems, there's a pretty lackadaisical time frame from when you hit the button until when the front suspension is up. And when you're trying to pull into a driveway and you suddenly realize that you want to put the system up because you're going to scrape, you end up stopped there waiting for the system to get up and get the front of the vehicle up before you'll scrape it. This one is not as quick as the Ford GT's instantaneous system, but it's very fast. It only takes it a couple seconds. That makes it much less annoying when you're in an urban environment and you're going through an intersection where you suddenly realize it's a nasty dip, or you're trying to pull off the street into a parking structure or parking lot while you wait for the front of the car to move up. Beyond that, 0 to 60 time in 3 seconds and a top speed of 205 miles per hour, this car will get from 0 to 124 miles per hour or 200 kilometers per hour in 8.4 seconds, and it'll clear the quarter mile in 10.8 seconds. Pretty much no matter how you're accelerating this vehicle and to what degree, it's fast. It's interesting to see how many driver assist systems are available on these cars, either standard or optional. This McLaren Artura Spider has blind spot warning, lane departure warning, and you can get rear cross traffic alert. You can get a digital rear view mirror. You can even get road sign recognition like a lot of the high-end luxury cars have now. Some people would argue whether that's kind of messing up the purity of these cars. They're drivers' cars. They're not supposed to be having a lot of driver assist systems. That's not supposed to be what drivers of sports cars and supercars are needing. But whether you like them or not, they're starting to become standard equipment or at least optional equipment on most supercars. I think my favorite aspect of this McLaren Artura Spider is that in spite of it being both a hybrid drivetrain and a retractable hardtop, it still weighs less than 3,500 pounds, which has always been kind of my cutoff. 3,500 pounds or below, you're telling me this car is supposed to go around corners and be fun to drive on a track or on a twisty road like this, I'm in. You pass 3,500, that's my crossover point. I have no interest in driving around corners in a car that weighs more than 3,500 pounds. And I do not care what the supposed lap times are. I do not care how fast it is. I don't want to wrestle a approaching 2-ton vehicle around corners. At that point, give me a Miata. I'll go drive a slow car fast versus a super powerful, capable, and overweight heavy car slow or even fast and feel like I'm having to wrestle all this poundage around these corners. Don't feel that at all in this car, in spite of its hybrid drivetrain that adds weight, and in spite of the retractable hardtop. 3,439 pounds, super impressive on this car. And of course, if you get the coupe version, you'll lose another, I think, 130 pounds roughly. The retractable hardtop only adds about 130 pounds to this car. Well within spec for what I want out of a handling-oriented supercar. As long as we're talking about the retractable hardtop on the McLaren Artura Spider and how impressed I am that it only adds about 130 pounds to it, let's talk about the fact that it will do its full retraction or close back up in 11 seconds at up to 31 miles per hour. And in this model, it's got the electrochromic technology that will turn from clear to opaque in, well, about 1 second when you hit the button. Now, that's a $9,400 option, so you have to really appreciate that technology. But as someone who hates the idea of being beaten on by UV rays, and I don't care if it's supposed to be a UV filtered glass, I'm not into these glass roofs that all these cars have, usually standard. You don't even have an option to get either a solid roof or some kind of a shade or sunshade to block your head from getting baked. But this technology, I can see how dark this roof gets, and I don't ever feel like I'm getting baked as I drive this vehicle when I've got it in the opaque mode. So I'm okay with this vehicle's glass roof, and I would spring, if I was buying one of these cars, the $9,400 to get the electrochromic technology to go with it. We've had lots of discussion about the McLaren Artura Spider's hybrid drivetrain, how that enhances its low-speed capabilities, gives it better fuel efficiency. We've talked about its advanced driver assist systems that you can now get, all the luxury features that are in here, the great interface with Apple CarPlay and really good high-resolution gauge cluster. But at the end of the day, it's a supercar, and that means it's supposed to go fast around corners, among other things. And it does. You drive the Artura on a road like this, and you're reminded how much energy McLaren puts into the stiff chassis, the carbon fiber tub, the suspension tuning, and of course, keeping it light and responsive. It's absolutely been a lot of fun driving this McLaren Artura Spider for the last few days. I've had it on everything from the mean streets of Beverly Hills to the twisty roads above Lake Elsinore. And I do feel like it's got a wide range of capabilities, and it really is an appealing package. This is one of the cars that gives me hope for a future of hybrid-powered supercars, because just going hybrid doesn't mean a bunch of extra weight and a bunch of anesthetized, disconnected, overly simulated driving experiences. This car still has hydraulic-assisted steering. It still weighs less than 3,500 pounds, and it even still makes a pretty cool exhaust note. Now, I've got the window sticker right here because I wasn't going to try to memorize all the stuff on this car, but I can tell you that it starts at $273,800, and there's a $5,000 destination charge. So your cheapest version of a McLaren Artura Spider is going to be $278,800. This one rings in at $365,518, so it's about $10,000 short, $13,000 short of costing $100,000 more in options. Let's take a look at some of the options. It's got the calipers with the polished silver logo for $2,200. It's got the wheel finish diamond cut, and it's got the 10-spoke SLW star forged alloy wheels, 19 in the front, 20 in the back, as we discussed. It's got the vertical front end lift, which is very fast. I'm pretty impressed with. It's got the technology pack that I believe adds the Apple CarPlay that this car's got. It's got the driver assistance pack, so things like blind spot warning and lane departure warning. It's got the fire extinguisher underneath the frunk for $300. It's got the $9,400 Tech Lux spec. I'm honestly not sure what all that includes. It does have the carbon fiber interior package for $4,050. It's got the lumbar support seats in the Club Sport form for another $1,250 to get the lumbar support. Remember, I mentioned it's got the $9,400 electrochromic roof, and it's got a $10,400 exterior carbon fiber pack that I'm sure adds things like these mirrors and those fender vents. It does have the Bowers & Wilkins audio system, which sounds really good. And it does have this Tokyo Cyan gorgeous blue paint that I absolutely love. It's an MSO exclusive paint, and it's $9,500. Those aren't all the options, but it's a good chunk of them. And it adds to the price that gets you up to $365,000. But when you consider the performance specs that this vehicle can brag, and when you consider the range of things it can do, running on pure electricity, charging itself without even needing the wall outlet if you put it in track mode, which I think is so cool. I just think it's so cool that you can decide to charge the battery up without having to deal with plugging it in. And honestly, the comfort, the quiet refinedness that it offers when you're at highway speeds and comfort modes, but all the excitement you get on a twisty road when you're in track mode for both the drivetrain and the handling, it's an incredibly good package. And I'm thinking that the future of hybrid supercars isn't nearly as depressing as I thought it was going to be. And this is the car that's made me convinced of that. So thank you, McLaren, and thank you for letting me enjoy this car for a few days.